consumer is doing in multiple locations their physical activity. They do it at home, they do it outdoors, and they do it in the fitness club.
Everybody comes in with an expectation. They expect to be able to achieve results. They expect to be able to have the freedom and the flexibility to be able to train on their terms. And our job is to make sure that we are 100% consistent in delivering that.
Thinking about Europe, I would say that it's even, to think of it like how we view 50 states is not even fair. It's a continent, it is incredibly diverse, there are different languages, there's different behavior and lifestyle.
How aligned the US is with Europe from just the behaviors. At ABC, we have a lot of data, so we focus a lot on behavioral analysis and member behavior, but also club growth and, to your point, acquisitions and whatnot. And when we're looking at the numbers for Europe, it actually aligned fairly well with the US, which was interesting.
Herman, Rutgers, and Stefan, Ludwig, welcome to this week's episode of L.I.F.T.S. We are at EuropeActive's EHFF, or the European Health and Fitness Forum. We did this last year, and we were just talking about this offline, that it was a very interesting, and we got a lot of great feedback from the segment because you put together such a comprehensive report. I'm holding it here, and it's material, it's heavy, it's meaningful.
150 pages.
I knew you would know that. No, 150 pages, and you did a great presentation this morning prior to this session. But what would you find, from last year's report to this year's report, what is the most material trend or change that you've seen?
Shall I take that one?
You give it a start.
I think the big changes last year, if we look at the market growth, and if we take the top 20 companies in Europe, how many clubs they added. This year, there was the major growth was through mergers and acquisitions. Last year, it was organic greenfield development of clubs of the top 20 chains. So that's a big change between the 2 years. Overall, I would say the growth of the market, we had around 6% growth in number of members, 10% growth in revenues for the industry. That is pretty comparable to last year. And what we should not forget is that we've come out of a 22 year, which was a Corona year. 23 was sort of a recovery year. 24 really was the first year with no hindrances, full business. Everybody was sort of recovering from those difficult years. So those are two big differences. The other one I would like to mention is that the consumer study we did, where we check, where does the consumer exercise? That the hybrid, as we call it, the hybrid consumer is doing in multiple locations their physical activity. They do it at home, they do it outdoors, and they do it in the fitness club. And there is a beautiful chart in the report that we showed this morning, where you see where it overlaps. And if you, bottom line of that graph is that what is growing is the fitness club participation. What's going down is the home, and what's pretty stable is outdoor. And of the total, around 23%, I should say of the total, 23% are doing multiple things, either and outdoor and the club or home and the club. And if you take the club in total, it's 55% of what we call the regular fitness practitioners. So it's the people who exercise at least once a week. That's the sample we studied for this particular analysis. So the message is really for operators to make sure your members, you also supply something that they can do outdoor. Help them to run a better marathon, give them tips on a cycling race they want to do, help them to do something at home when it rains, snows, when they can't go out to the club. And of course we have apps and we have videos, and there's a lot of technology that we now can help people to exercise when they can't come to the club. And this holistic approach to exercise, and I would say health more, because people, we also see, we ask this question on the mental health. It's a big issue, particularly with the Gen Z people. I mean, I'm sure Corona has something to do with that. But there is absolutely a big wealth of information in there also on how the consumer sees the other things that are beyond building muscle or getting fitter or improving your cardio fitness. So I think it's a wealth of, so that also was for me a takeaway from this year, that you see an increase in the people who say, I'm in it for my health and not just for becoming a bodybuilder or doing something for my muscles.
I was going to say something which we see as a trend in the U.S. And I was having breakfast. I don't want to name the CEO with the CEO today of a very large technology company here in Europe, and he was saying that he got on GLP-1, and he's been on GLP-1 for 3 months. He's lost about 20 pounds, and that he really views this as being transformative for how he thinks about the industry, and he believes that it's a good thing, and he's seen good benefits of it. It's helped him get fitter and stronger and stay more in shape. Has that been reflected, or have you seen an impact of GLP-1s? I mean, the largest GLP-1 company is in Europe.
Yeah, Novo Nordisk.
That's
yeah,
correct.
no, we didn't study that this year, but we do have a speaker this afternoon on that topic. I know who you're talking
We'll have
about.
on later.
Yeah, he's on it. He's on at 4 o'clock, I think, or 3 o'clock. But I know the person you're talking to. I spoke to him as well. But he also stressed the importance of when you're on Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever medicine it is, GLP-1, to do strength exercise, right. Because you don't want to lose your 20 kilos in muscle. You want to lose it in fat. And that's why you need to continue to do strength. So I personally believe that it's a huge opportunity for our industry to benefit from this GLP-1 development. And of course, the US is further ahead. You know, there's some countries in Europe where it's not even allowed yet. And it's very expensive. You know, it's only for the people who can afford, what is it, per month, 400 or 500 euros to be on Ozempic. It's not covered by the health insurance. It's a private investment. But I think it's a positive thing for our industry. That's for sure.
With the report, it'll be good to give the listeners a bit of an overview of how you're approaching it. I know you mentioned Brian O'Rourke complimented you on it being one of the best reports in the industry, but what can, for those people who haven't got it already, what can we expect, and how have you gone about pulling together the information that's in the report to make it as accurate as what you claim it to be?
Stefan.
I mean, first of all, we have been doing that for quite some time. This is the 12th edition of the European Market Report. Being a partner at Deloitte in Germany, we have been working on the German fitness industry for more than 20 years. We also published our German Market Report today, which is the 22nd edition. So we have a lot of experience from the research. Second thing, as Deloitte, we work continuously in the industry as advisor. We support companies or investors in M&A activities, in market expansion activities. As part of those projects, we also investigate on a very detailed level the different markets across Europe. We have very sound and reliable data in several markets. We just recently, together with EuropeActive, published the first report on Great Britain in the fitness sector, together with 4Global, Deloitte, and EuropeActive. So over the years, we have gained a lot of insights in the markets. We have our network of operators, of industry experts, of representatives from equipment companies. More and more, we see the industry being penetrated by fitness software products or fitness software providers, which also gives us more regular, reliable data. And all of that flows into this report in order to be the best and most reliable source of data for the fitness industry. If there's one key learning from Corona, or if there is a positive thing about the Corona time, it's the fact that, or there are actually two. First of all, it's the fact that the industry needs more reliable data in order to be recognized by governmental institutions who decide over the good or bad of certain industries. And the fitness industry was hit the hardest, probably, among many industries during the Corona time. They had very long closing periods. The second positive thing about the Corona is the growing health awareness and the understanding of positive effects of regular, active engagement or active fitness and sports activities for people on their health and well-being situation. So not only just the physical health, but also the mental health. So these are two good things. We should have not had the Corona time to make these learnings, but these are two of the good things coming out of this very challenging time for the European fitness industry.
How are you choosing the key bits of information that you want to represent, and why, why are those pieces that you decide relevant? How have you gone about sort of getting, making those decisions? Is that based on what some of the operators are asking you, or from your own sort of research, or?
We are trying to illustrate the most important KPIs of the industry, which is the number of facilities and the development of it. We have seen a slight increase. It's typically from the major operators who continue their expansion, opening new facilities in order to grow their business. Second thing is number of members, which is both driven by opening new facilities, because where there is an offer, this is also one of the learnings from being 20 years in this industry, if there is an offer to exercise, there is already a demand typically, which then can be met by this new offering. So we still have a very different level of penetration in European countries, meaning the number of members compared to the total population. So for example, in the Scandics, we have up to 20% penetration, whereas in Germany, for example, we have around about 14, UK around about 16, 17%. But we have seen from those expansion activities of large operators, typically if they have a good product, if they are in an area with a respective catchment reach, then they can fill the facility and provide services to the respective community. So, and last but not least, after facilities, number of members, of course, it's the financials. So how much revenue is generated in the business. We would, of course, love to do much more. That's typically something we do in our financial or commercial due diligence work when we advise investors or corporate investors, private equity investors. That's where we go into more detail. That's where we have more detailed insights in company financials, where we do also competitor analysis and things like that. But for this report, these are the key pieces of information which are also required to show the relevance of this industry and the impact of this industry. And this sort of supported by the consumer research, where we also ask question not only how often you go, but what's the impact of you being a member and going regular to a fitness club or doing regular fitness activity on their overall health and well-being perception, which that's one of the findings. It's significantly better than of those people surveyed which have no regular fitness activity.
Are your members frustrated by long lines for squat racks? Equipment like squat racks are in high demand. There's a new solution that will allow your clients to train all the major muscle groups, reduce wait time, and improve your overall gym's efficiency. Curious to know more? Then contact us today.
That's really interesting. One of the things that we've seen, I cannot agree with you more, in terms of the pull forward of awareness post-pandemic. But that's also, I think, a bit segregated. The higher you move up the income scale, the more awareness there has been in terms of health and wellness. And that was a trend that was continuing before the pandemic, and certainly after, where now you have like Oura rings and you are taking more control of your own health. And some of that has been driven by a lack of trust in the traditional healthcare system, right? Which I always say is more in the US, more of a sick care system. You know, it could fix you when you're broken. And our industry has a good opportunity because we understand where you were before you got sick and how you do after you were sick. But with that comment, do you think that, look, Europe is a lot more fragmented than the US. Some markets in Europe, like Germany and Italy, are even more fragmented when you look at operators. You talked about mergers and acquisitions as a key trend, which I do believe is, I agree with you, is going to continue. Do you think consumers, though, are also fragmented, or do you see more similarities with consumers across the region in terms of their preferences and what consumers want?
I think consumers are very fragmented, and that's also one of the good things of the health and fitness industries. We are serving much better those different interests in terms of price point, in terms of fitness offering, in terms of facility, in terms of being a member in a club, or maybe working out online, or as Herman pointed out, also the classical fitness operators need to think in other areas where they can offer their product, being it outdoor or being it through app or web services. So I strongly believe within a country, but also across Europe, we have a very fragmented consumer situation with different needs and wants in terms of their activity level or their interest in doing sports and fitness activities.
I totally agree. I think if we look at Europe, where we 10% of the total European population, 450 million consumers, 10% is member of a health club today. If we want to tap into the other 90% and growing to our objective of 100 million members, we had 72 million in 24, we're going to grow to 100 million by 2030. The only way to get there is to attract new customers. And how do we do that? By having operators who satisfy demand by the consumer. And yes, the market is fragmented, but you see also a proliferation in offerings. We have personal training studios, EMS studios, we have Pilates, we have yoga, we have a lot of different offerings. We have the budget clubs, but we also have the high end. We have the clubs that really approach the holistic side with nutrition advice, with sleeping advice, the whole thing that concerns a consumer's health. That is where the opportunity is. And the proliferation among operators is also increasing, because you see new ideas, new trends coming out, which will attract new customers. The gamification, if you want to attract younger people, although we already have a pretty young profile of our customers in the fitness industry today, if you want to attract the older ones, we need to offer more strength training, specialized strength training clubs. We need to talk to doctors and talk to the health. You talk to the sick care sector to tell them, if you put people on Ozempic, make sure they also do strength training, that they don't lose all their muscle mass, but they lose the weight. But as we know, muscles weigh more than fat, right? I mean, so losing weight through fat loss is quicker than...
And we have one new kid on the block. It's no longer a kid. It's probably a young adult. It's the aggregator, the fitness aggregator intermediary business. 10 years ago, something like that did not exist. Now, with large providers in that area even being stock listed, we have already reached a level. For example, in Germany, 10% of the total members number comes from aggregators.
Well, which is why Urban Sports Club just got acquired.
Exactly. And the positive factor in that area is, again, to a certain extent, it's a new target group, because it's the corporate benefit industry, where corporations, employers also during Corona have realized much more how important a healthy employee is for them. We have increasing number of sick days, we have increasing problems of employees, and many corporations, and we have lots of numbers from our German research, many corporations are investing in that. There are even tax benefits for both sides, for the employee and the employer, to provide those fitness and sport memberships through aggregators, as they are not only providing access to fitness facilities, but also to swimming halls, to climbing areas, online services. Once again, lowering the level or the entry barrier, because it's subsidized by the corporation. So you can even afford a high profile fitness offering for a much lower price point, because it's partially paid by your corporate employer.
You mentioned there being fragmentation from the consumer, from the operator side, and then Herman, you referenced things like Pilates and strength training, but most of these concepts are also being driven by different vendors and manufacturers into the space. Obviously, this isn't something that's covered within the report, but it's an area I know you've got quite a bit of experience and visibility into. You know, what are you seeing happening on the supply side? Are you seeing the same kind of fragmentation now happening? Certainly, just understanding what's going on behind us there would probably say so. Or are you seeing more consolidation? If you look at companies like Technogym that are now, I know it's moving into Pilates, and they've got obviously strength training and cardio, and they seem to be sort of consolidating everything that's out there that would be typically offered by independent manufacturers. So where are you guys seeing that? And it doesn't necessarily have to be driven by data, but just sort of your experience within the industry.
Yeah, good question. We have tried. There is a small chapter in the report on the supply side, on the manufacturers. Of course, Technogym is a stock market. We have those numbers, so they're in there. We have Johnson Health Tech is stock market listed, so we have a few of the big ones that are there. But L.I.F.T.S is privately owned by private equity, so we don't have those numbers. Precor is owned by, as we all know, by Peloton. And there is a lot of suppliers. Just to take your question or your comment on the show here, the FIBO, do you know how many strength manufacturers there are? 112. 112, and that goes from a small guy who makes welding in his shop in his garage and has a booth here, as to there's a lot of Chinese vendors here. There are brands that are not Technogym, L.I.F.T.S, Precor, or the big ones that we know, Matrix, but the smaller ones that are coming in from the Far East. So there is an enormous amount of offerings. Is there proliferation taking place on the supplier side? I think the bigger are getting bigger. There is definitely concentration. If you take the big brands that are consolidated are taking a higher market share, but there still is a lot of opportunity for newcomers on the market. If we take a German company called eGym, they were not there 10 years ago. I think that's how long they are on the market, and they now are a force to reckon with, only making electronic strength equipment and of course providing also an aggregator service. So you have here Gym 80 around the corner here from FIBO is a huge German manufacturer of strength equipment. So I see specialization. You talk about Pilates, companies are making just Pilates equipment, but do it very well. We should not forget, the people who are offering virtual solutions for this sector. So if you look, the booth, there is no booth space to be had at this show. No. It's sold out. If you say, I want 10 square meters, you can't get it. So that shows you that, and it's not all the big suppliers. There is a lot of smaller ones that are, there is country halls, so I don't see any, if anybody talks about saturation in our sector, what are they talking about? We still have so many consumers to convince, and also operators have an enormous choice on which supplier to buy equipment from. You with Escape, of course, are supplying equipment. So, and you're filling a segment of the market that others are not. And I think just as a club operator, as a supplier, you think of what is somebody else not doing that I can do that really supplies something that people are looking for. So I'm not pessimistic at all. On the contrary, I'm very optimistic. Did we talk about the 100 million by 2030? I don't think we did.
We did a little bit. You mentioned it, but go ahead.
We had 72 million members in Europe in the health clubs that are a member of a health club in 24. That's the last number. Our goal was, and we made it in 2019, before Corona happened, and then we said the next decade, where do we want to go, and put a stake in the ground, 100 million by 2030. Then Corona hit. We had 2 years of downfall in number of members, downfall in revenues. We still believe, it's in the report, that we believe that we still can do the 100 million by 2030. We need to grow 5.6% between now and then every year in order to get, by number of members, to get to 100 million. It's very doable. And that's not the end. Yeah.
Well, and that's similar to a goal in the U.S., which I'm sure you know. There's a 30 by 30, which is 30% of the U.S. population, which is about 20 to 23%, hitting 30% of the minimum rules, or whatever you want to put it, for the U.S. But It's been great to have you both on. If people want to get the report, I know we got a complimentary report from being at EHFF, but how can people acquire this report?
Go to the EuropeActive website, and there you can find it. There is the Knowledge Center, but it's very easy. You go to the EuropeActive website, say European Market Report, EHFMR is the name of the report, but you'll find it there, and then you can order it.
We'll put a link on the podcast for it. I can't wait. This will be my flight back reading. Yeah. So thank you for providing that, but thank you also for being on.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Elaine Jobson, CEO of Jets Fitness.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure. Good to be here.
Is it good to be back in Europe again?
It is good to be back. I always like coming back to Europe. I love the cold. Having been in Queensland for 12 years, it's nice to have some cold and get all your winter clothes out.
How are you seeing the market compared to what's happening out in Australia?
I think both Europe and Australia, they're competitive markets. Australia tends to be a little bit further behind in terms of its innovation. It's often waiting to see what happens in the UK, to see what happens in the US, and then tends to copy a lot of the innovations that happen, which is actually quite good. It's a real advantage point that I've learned, that you can kind of see how things happen over there, and then when you see the success really take traction, then you can kind of bring it to Australia. But it's very far away. It's just it's very detached, and I have to do things like this. I've got to get on a few aeroplanes. I've got to get into the more mature markets and really kind of plug in and network and understand what is going on. Because I say it's like getting in a TARDIS and going forward in time. Because I can see what's happening now here, and obviously we're going to be in the show for the next few days. Is going to be what's happening in Australia in probably about 5 years' time. So by the time it kind of gets traction over there. So it's actually quite useful in my role to be able to have this opportunity to see ahead what
both sides of things. I notice that when I'm in the US as well, like there's some stuff that happens there that you bring back here and they don't see, and vice versa. Just to paint a bit of a picture, like what markets are Jets in now?
So obviously Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, the Netherlands, the UK, and we're just about to go into India. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was just in Australia in December, I think, about that. And we work with a few brands that are in Australia as well. I actually thought that Australia has a lot of innovation in some ways, because from a US perspective, you look at brands like F45, BFT. When I was in Australia, I went to the Gold Coast area, and there's a lot of very small but forward-thinking, like recovery studios. I went to one called Therapy, I think it's called, and it was a really kind of unique, where they did contrast therapy, and they had these unique types of boutique classes. As a population, I think it seems like to me, again, I'm an outsider coming in, so and of course I'm in the fitness industry, so I'm going to these places, but it seems like the population is really invested in fitness and in wellness. And also, I would say, I don't have any data around this, but I would assume that you've got the highest concentration of Pilates compared to anywhere else in the world. So I went into a couple of big box gyms. I did not go to yours, but I saw that not only are there Pilates studios in a higher capacity than what we're used to, but they were also utilized. Full as well.
Yeah, the culture is huge into health and fitness, wellness. Yeah. And it's actually quite a polarized nation, because you do tend to get very sports orientated. They come through school, there's a lot of school sports, they love watching their sport, but you do then kind of have this separation that happens when people hit their early 20s, where some will stay within the kind of health and fitness, and some will actually become inactive. And it's kind of like these two, it's quite polarized in the population. But yeah, there's a very strong culture of health and fitness, similar to the UK, I think, in terms of the penetration that we have into the market. It sits around 14%. But yeah, that innovation is often driven from franchising. So Australia is a massive franchising market. They're very pro-franchising. So a lot of these concepts, F45 is a great example. It's a very successful franchising concept. You know, low barrier to entry, low cost to open one. A lot of personal trainers want to own their own gym, but obviously don't have necessarily the systems or resources to do it. And you can go and buy a franchise. And I think the US and Australia are very similar in their franchising penetration. So it's if you can get that right with the success of a fitness concept and get into the franchising market, it can take fire, which obviously F45 did and was very, very successful. And there's that innovation will come out of it, and that's because it's a population that's very driven off things like property ownership. People really want to own their own houses. That's almost like it's an expectation that they would have growing up, that one day we're going to own our own house.
Yeah.
So when you've got a lot of people owning assets, then obviously they're going to borrow against those assets to be able to open their own businesses, and that's where the franchising kind of comes in. So yeah, it's a fascinating market.
Which is similar, not too different than the US, where people like to own houses and then they use it as an asset to borrow against. Exactly. To open up a business. Yeah. And when you look at the market, and I'm just curious about Jet's positioning, we've seen a lot of growth over the last 10 years, including post-pandemic, in HVLP and the premium sector. But recently, in the last couple of years, and we recently interviewed Dan from Everlast, in the mid-market kind of tier, there's been strong growth there as well, coming in that mid-market where they're updating the facilities and they're kind of trying to differentiate themselves between HVLP and premium. Where do you view Jet today, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got 3 models. Mm-hmm. So we deploy the right model for the right markets, because I've been very fortunate to work in 4 different continents, around the world with fitness. And what I learned was that you have to meet the market where it's at. So you have to have the product that's relevant for that. So if you take Australia, there's a lot of suburban locations, quite sprawling, spread out, where you'll get maybe 10,000 people to 20,000 people living in a town, big gap between, and then the next town. So a lot of the Jets in Australia are almost like the kind of snap and anytime concept, 24-hour, relatively small box, and run by 1 or 2 people. And then you kind of come to the UK, and that model's not going to work, because obviously that is being served by Gym Group, Pure Gym, do a great 24-hour box, no locking contracts, half the price of what we charge in Australia. So we had to adapt that model into the market in the UK. So we've got what we call an affordable boutique model. Still the same kind of demographic, still quite young, but more high-end, a slightly more premium concept and more cutting edge, because, young people want something that's vibey. They've got beautiful decoration in them, they've got the strobe lighting, it looks quite amazing. But that's what's suitable for the UK. And then say go to Thailand, and they're big into group exercise. So we've got to put studios in, and we've got to put a lot of high service in. 20 personal trainers per gym, because everybody loves to have personal training. So we're not afraid of taking the brand, taking the logo, keeping that consistent, the brand values stay consistent, they're the guardrails, but outside of that, we're happy to adapt the product depending on what that market is. So hence you'll see things slightly different wherever you go in the world with Jets.
You're mentioning, obviously you're in franchising, and there was a session on this morning where one of the questions came up was, do we see the health and fitness industry moving towards a similar model like the hospitality? And one of the things that I've started to hear, probably only recently really, is that there are chains where the quality, as some of these franchises are expanding, there's challenges maintaining quality and service from some of the operators, and as a result, not all of them are being successful. But what some of these organizations and investors do have is the ability to invest and build out the facilities, but not particularly great at running them. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know certain operators are now looking at working with people that have got the sites, going in and managing it all on from an operational perspective. Do you what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you guys have ever looked at, and do you feel that we're likely to see more of it in the health and fitness industry?
Yeah, I mean, Jets is 17 years old, so we've been doing this for a long time, and The one thing that you do need is that product consistency. And I think sometimes what happens, especially in franchising makes you go fast, because obviously you're not relying on raising capital. You've got, the whole country's capital to go at. You've got all of those houses that, people own that you can obviously borrow against. And if your concept's successful, then everybody wants it quickly. So you see these franchise brands grow very, very fast, and they just don't have the systems in place to be able to sustain the controls that you need in franchising to get the standards consistent. So that's where it tends to come undone. So what we did, maybe slightly different, is that we grew up quickly at the beginning, and then we slowed everything down. And the reason we did that was because we needed to get systems in place, and then you need to obviously grow off multiple owners. So, owners that are going to own multiple sites. And that's where you get the IP sitting in the network, where they understand how to open a gym, they understand what kind of people you're looking for. The club managers can come from their current teams and obviously, evolve into the next club. And that does mean that you have to sacrifice your size. So we always knew that we weren't going to be the biggest, even though we were the first 24-hour gym to start in Australia. We were never going to be the biggest because we weren't prepared to do what it took and to put the amount of risk into the franchise system and to accept a level of failure to be able to kind of do a land grab and kind of grow the country as fast as we probably could have done. And the other challenge is leasing. It's hard to look at the fitness model without thinking about the leasing model. Most gyms are now leased, and they are dependent on the success or the quality of that lease arrangement. And when everyone's trying to grow very fast together, everyone's competing for the same sites. And, who's going to, obviously a landlord will sit there and obviously be able to kind of put the prices up of that location. But we would walk away from those deals and accept that we're not going to necessarily be in that location because we're not prepared to take on a lease which is not going to have a long-term success attached to it. So I think the quality of the business is everything. It's the quality of the experience of the members. It's the quality of the team. It's the quality of the financial success and the financial model of that. And you do have to trade it off. You can't have that and have very fast high growth. The two just can't sit comfortably together. So you've got to compromise somewhere.
One last question. It sounds like you're really focused on the member experience, and that's really meaningful to you. You talked about adding Group X in Thailand with a lot of personal trainers, having a more premium experience but value in the UK. What is next? What do you think consumers want? It sounds like you really have a pulse on members, and I'm really interested in and focused on what members want next. Like for instance, in the US, we see a lot of ask around personalization, around integrating wearables. What are you seeing in the markets?
Yeah, it's fascinating because obviously Gen Alpha is coming through, and I've got one at home. She's a kind of late Gen Z, early Gen Alpha, and they're a different breed. And you can see how their expectations that they get to make a lot of decisions. Like this decision-making animal that they are, that they want to have control of many things, and it's all on their terms, and it's all on their terms with no expectation it would be anything other. Which is challenging, and to be able to serve that kind of customer. But for us, we are a very customer-centric company. We are known for that. We don't do any kind of contracts. We don't do one type of contract in the business. We don't have any hidden fees. We don't put in strange, get out of your membership with 30 days notice and advertise. We're no lock-in contract business, so we're very, very I guess trusted is probably the best word to use for it. And I think when you have a trusted brand like ours in the market, then when the members go in, they've got to really feel that. And so we drive it a lot through culture. That's what we're really known for, is being able to get a very deep culture. We've been on the Great Place to Work Awards for the last 8 years. We have a Net Promoter Score in a low-cost environment, really, our low-cost model. Our Net Promoter Score has never been lower than 70. So it's unusual for a concept like ours to invest so much, but it's because we understand that the customer, when they come in, and whether it be somebody who's Gen Alpha or Gen Z or Gen X, it doesn't matter. humans all want the same thing. You know, everybody comes in with an expectation. You know, they expect to be able to achieve results. They expect to be able to have the freedom and the flexibility to be able to train on their terms. And our job is to make sure that we are 100% consistent in delivering that. So we call it the brilliant basics, where, you know, there's certain things in life that you can't drop the ball on. You know, you can't go to work in air traffic control and say, it's okay, you know, today we landed 98% of the planes accurately. We only put 4 into the tarmac. That's not going to wash it. So we have the same approach to the gym. And so what we do very well is we consistently deliver on those basics, whether that be, you know, customer service, quality and standards, you know, health and safety. You know, we're very, very good at that. So we're very good at not having detractors in our membership, and I think that gives us like an edge, because it sounds really simple to do the brilliant basics, but it's actually not that. It's simple but not easy is probably the best way to put it.
Well, Elaine, thank you very much for your time today.
Very welcome. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Well, Matthew, we're excited to have 2 people who I've gotten to know better over the last couple of months from ABC Fitness. Conor, who's the Chief Revenue Officer, and Mike Escobedo, Chief Customer Officer. I was going to say customer success because that is ultimately what you do. But
it is.
And I believe this is your first time coming on our L.I.F.T.S podcast.
It is.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Why has it taken so long?
You know, we have to talk. We've had other ABC people on, but it has to, because we've known each other, we've spoken to each other, but here we are. We are on. So you are at FIBO. We're actually sitting at EHFF today, which is the European Health and Fitness Forum. I saw you both here last year, and I think you've been here the year prior into that as well. But now ABC's got a more material and meaningful presence. ABC's got a booth here. Speak a bit about why you decided to come back again to EHFF and FIBO, and what about this market excites you?
Love that. You want to take it?
Okay, yeah, no, it's like myself and Mike, we were walking the floor here last year, really. I think like where you kind of take a step back and you look at ABC and its history, it's been very much a North America focused business for the past kind of 35 years, predominantly, and over recent years have through investments, both organic and inorganic, created capabilities really to transpose that success onto an international market. And so last year was very much, you know, for us, it was more of a scouting mission for us, where we were really assessing just the opportunity. You know, Europe it's quite fragmented. There's a lot of nuances to be able to really penetrate that effectively, and we wanted to be very intentional and strategic with our approach at how we did that. I think last year, in particular, where we spent a lot of time just gaining intel and speaking to people on the ground here, you know, we just got a lot of excitement and conviction around how well we were positioned to really make that market entry. So this year we're showing up in full force. We got our booth, we got our team, and reflected with, again, too, just a great session where we just got an insight into the strength of the European market in particular for fitness. So really excited about it.
Yeah. Now, like you said, ABC, again, primarily historically has been US based. And for goodness, 40 years now. So we've got that dialed in. Just in the last 5 years, we've expanded internationally. And when we were choosing events and just different things to invest in, as Conor said, when we came out last year, it was incredibly impressive. So I want to say 7 times the amount of folks and exhibitors than any other event around the globe. So it is incredible. It is established. We are so excited to be here. It's really cool.
How are you looking at the market from your perspective? We had a session this morning and it talked about a lot of the changes in the market, a lot of the M&A activity, and also a lot of the consolidation. So, you know, when you're looking at, I guess, your typical client profile in the US and how that market evolved and expanded, what are some of the things that you took away, probably a question to both of you really, from this morning's session in terms of how you see the market evolving in Central Europe?
I think at first, the thing that surprised me is how aligned we are, how aligned the US is with Europe. From just the behaviors. At ABC, we have a lot of data, so we focus a lot on behavioral analysis and member behavior. but also club growth and, to your point, acquisitions and whatnot. And when we're looking at the numbers for Europe, it actually aligned fairly well with the US, which was interesting. I think where we can augment it and bring even additional insights is now the member view. So we had really good data on the club view and the industry as a whole, but bringing in that member behavior and augmenting that, I think would be a really good add.
I think something that was interesting today, and we spoke about it actually throughout the session, was in terms of differences, like you would have seen like America as being a bit more maybe progressive in a lot of the modalities, and definitely from a participation rate perspective, like being at 23%, you saw where it actually broke down the data, like the highest comparison was in the Nordics at 20%, and actually a lot of it was a lot lower. So while, you know, I think the participation rate is still an area of opportunity, but there is growth and progress and momentum, and I think that's really where you're seeing that some of these maybe more perceived as laggard countries in adoption of technology and actually of being able to translate that into participation in fitness has actually improved, you know, significantly over the last number of years. So while it is maybe in some ways, you know, a little less on that kind of evolution and growth of participation and adoption of technology, I do feel like the progress and momentum is very evident from the data that we saw today.
If you were to think about in the US, I would say a lot of US brands, when they go internationally, and I've worked with many of them who've tried to do that, they try to take what is very American and almost dump it onto any other market and say it should work. And obviously, you know, you both know that that is not really true. But thinking about Europe, I would say that it's even, to think of it like how we view 50 states is not even fair. It's a continent, it is incredibly diverse, there are different languages, there's different behavior and lifestyle things that they have to work through. How do you think, you know, how do you view coming into Europe? Do you view this as having 30 different strategic plans, or do you come in here with a product and a strategy that is more nimble, that could be more flexible? Do you view this more as a product being flexible, or more having like different plans across the region?
Yeah, I think with anything, it's for being very intentional and very committed to providing not just a product, but of kind of a full service that really speaks to that market. And so, to your point, every country in Europe is very different in terms of its adoption of technology, in terms of its modalities of fitness that are more prevalent, and obviously from just an economic climate perspective, there's a lot of the nuances that that all factor into how you enter into that market. So with us, we're very kind of intentional and focused in terms of where do we see that convergence of the right opportunity with our ability to serve from a product perspective, but also from a service and people perspective too, to give a holistic offering that really resonates in these. So we really feel we're going more intentional with identifying these kind of key markets and start to build in the beachheads there and build out from there. Our initial focus is really kind of establishing our UK presence. However, we've also been very fortunate to serve like a lot already in the UK, and we have some great brands in Spain and Portugal, like the likes of Bout and folks that we just met outside, and then you have like some huge chains in the likes of Poland with Extreme Fitness. However, with ABC really taking that history and pedigree and bringing it to Europe, it is a more intentional, focused approach.
I love the question. I love the setup even more. And here's why. The diversity aspect that you referenced in Europe, if we take it a step back, you've been in the fitness industry for a while, it is incredibly diverse, right? The industry, if we just take the US, in the fitness industry in the US, it is so diverse. And so flexibility has been key in our pedigree to be able to accommodate, different models and different ideas. And so that same approach as we expand internationally is what we're taking. So we're obviously confident in what we deliver. I mentioned the data. We have, 30,000 locations, 40 million members around the globe. So we sit on a lot of data. We know what we do well, but we also love to learn. And so coming in to Europe, we're looking at this as a learning opportunity as well, knowing that, yes, we've got to be nimble, we've got to be flexible, different languages, different cultures, different, right? But it's that is a muscle that is well, we're well used to, simply the flexibility aspect because of the diversity in the industry itself.
Rebecca was mentioning that when she was giving an example of Pure Gym. They were in the UK where it's 64 million people, I think, and then she gave an example of Switzerland, yes, where there's 4 languages and about 21 different zones. I'm not sure what they call them in Switzerland. Like, how are you going to? Because the US is, although there are differences, it is very similar across a huge country with a huge population. When you're coming into Europe, there are so many differences and laws and taxes and you name it. Like, how are you going to approach that? Because I guess you can't take on the whole thing at once and be successful, is my guess. So how are you looking at it, and how are you, I guess, setting your priorities in terms of where you see the opportunities for your business, but also the opportunities for the market as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that accelerated that for us was the acquisition of Glowfox just a few years ago, because they were already established. You think banking relationships, you think culturally, whatnot, they were already established in many of these countries. And so that serves as a bit of an accelerant, right? When you combine two great companies, 2 great pedigrees. So from that perspective, I think, we were able to, like I said, it provided an accelerant there. Now we have the opportunity. I'm curious, as you're thinking, now that we have come together, we're looking at this holistically. We have the opportunity to know, okay, hey, we combine what we know with, again, what we're learning and the flexibility there. It's actually really fun because we're able to hit the ground and we're able to say, hey, and look for those similarities. You mentioned, while worlds apart, there's so many similarities. So when you come in fresh like this, you're able to take a look. All right, about 60% is the same. This is the 40% delta. Now let's attack it. How do we approach it?
That's so true. And it's funny because I was talking to someone today and they said, well, ABC seems like a West Coast company. We're not even in the West Coast. Yeah. And do you have any people here? I said, well, we have a whole team in Ireland and Portugal. They're like, wait, what? So the interesting thing though is, Americans have a perception, which I think is not fully accurate, about Europeans, but the same is true the other way. I think when Europeans think of Americans, they've got a perspective on what it's like to work with an American company, which I'm sure there's some truth to that, but it's probably not entirely true. And when people think about a company like ABC or even others, they don't really understand that you might have operations, here. Even with your company, Matthew, you've got operations in the US, you've got operations in Eastern Europe and in the UK, but people probably they think of you either as a UK company, or if you're in the US, they'll think of you as a US company. So I think it's important for brands or customers to look and say, okay, well, really, where are they set up and how can they support me? Because that perspective might not always be accurate. But Conor, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's a great call out, and I really enjoyed actually the conversation around how brands are thinking about how they enter into new regions. And a big part of it is we listen to our customers. I think like where we've both from where we want to go into in terms of partnering with customers that are thinking about international growth and trying to deliver a very similar service in regions, but it be localized enough to really fit with the market audience. So it's kind of like you want the McDonald's burger to taste the same in New York as it does in Tokyo, and using the same platform and software system allows for that. But there are these nuances in terms of whether it's invoicing systems that are required from a legal perspective in Portugal, are nuances around payment processors or legal entities that are set to be established. However, again, it comes back to trying to find that path where's the overlay of the opportunity with where our customers see growth, where we can be able to make the required investments to be able to serve that. And to your point, Mo, we're a 2,000 person organization that has team members in over 30 countries, and we've got customers in over 80 countries. So our ability to kind of support that as well too is something that we're really building out as our core competency.
I think another fun perspective that we're still learning, you mentioned the similarities, is oftentimes when we talk about international expansion, we default from US out it's the same in the opposite, right? And so there's plenty of European brands that are looking to expand in the US, right? And how we can help with that. We just had 3 conversations literally this morning on what's the US market like? If we were to come there, where would we fit in? So there's a lot of cross-pollination on that front as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of FIBO.
Well, I think before we go, Conor and I are doing a High Rocks tomorrow.
I was hoping you'd bring this up.
We're going to strategize around that. The High Rocks is a German brand. It's really grown immensely over the last couple of years. They're having a 4-day event here at FIBO. And I said, Conor, do you want to do one? And not knowing his athletic prowess, I think we could now be competitive. So,
well, I don't know how you feel about carrying an 82 kgs around your back around that.
Well, that's you. No, you're
He's going to crush it. He's going to crush it.
You're going to crush it. So.
I don't know.
And the crutches and the wheelchair and the ice packs are all going to be ready for you when you're done.
Good. Yeah.
That's how we're kicking off our day tomorrow, which is going to be fun.
It'll be great. Let's do it.
We're looking forward to it. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it.